All right, I'm going to say that all again, so we have it recorded. A nice welcome to everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Fourth Salary Commission, Independent Salary Commission meeting. Today's Tuesday, May 9th, and we will be meeting this evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Before we actually begin into the meeting, I just want to welcome our OMF Equity Manager working with the Credit Transition Team, Juan Carlos Ocaña-Chu. He is here to observe and offer advice as needed. So thanks for being here, Juan Carlos. We really appreciate it. So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Liam, who is going to briefly discuss the Zoom logistics.
Hey everyone, this meeting is being recorded for later viewing. A copy of this recording will be posted on the Salary Commission website under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom right side of your screen. We also have ASL and Spanish interpretation available at this meeting. You can access this feature through the interpretation button located on the menu controls at the bottom of your screen. Instructions on how to access are in the chat, access to the interpreters. And just a reminder, again, for all commissioners, please change your chat settings to everyone so that everyone listening today can follow along. Just heads up that the chat is part of public record. Community members listening in, we have the Zoom and Q&A feature available. Feel free to submit questions or comments through there. We may not be able to answer all the questions today, but they will become part of the public meeting record. And for tonight's meeting, there is verbal comment. Viewers, you can submit public comments through our comment form online, on our website, or by emailing transition@portlandoregon.gov. Be on the lookout for future public comment opportunities on our website. And now I will pass it on to Commissioner Gill.
Yes. Mission business. In your packet of materials, you received the meeting minutes from the April 27th. Are there any edits or changes the commissioners would like to make? If not, can I have a motion to vote on the meeting minutes using the 1 to 5 method? Please use the number of fingers or a fist in the chat. Again, the number of fingers represents the strength of your yes vote. A fist vote is a 0 and blocks consensus. I will also vote. Great. Did we get everybody? I can't monitor the chat at the same time. All right.
I see 4 yeses.
Okay. And we didn't get Commissioner Martinez yet?
I do not see Commissioner Martinez.
Okay, we will proceed. Next, you all received the public comment report in your email. To date, we have received 7 public comments, including a verbal public comment we received during the last meeting. There are no additional public comments received since the last meeting, except for I believe we received a memo just today. Jamie, is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Commissioner Gill. Today, we received a memo from the League of Women Voters that will be counted as public comment. It is a fairly lengthy memo, and so I put it in the chat. If you want to spend time reviewing it, it's the very first thing in the chat. I did it before we started the meeting, so you should see it there. And Janice Thompson from the League of Women Voters has signed up to provide public comment tonight and will be reviewing the memo with you all. And I think Commissioner Gill, you are going to save kind of the discussion for it for the next meeting so that people have time to review and read it.
Yes, that is correct. I felt like it was a very important and lengthy memo, so it's probably best to have time to review it before we discuss it.
And I see folks saying that they don't see it in the chat, so I will go ahead and upload it again. I also want to note that there is one commissioner, I'm trying to figure out who it is. I think it's Commissioner Engers, who is still on host and panelists and not everyone. If you could change your settings to everyone so that we could see your votes when we vote.
I changed it before you even said anything, but
look at you. You're on it. Okay. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Commissioner Gill.
All right. Do any of the commissioners want to discuss the public comments further? All right. Just a reminder to the commission and the public listening in. We will be holding a verbal comment at the end of the meeting to give folks a chance to hear our discussion first. So as a reminder, we also have chosen to limit public comment times to 2 minutes each. Jamie, can you confirm if anyone has signed up for public comment other than what you've already discussed?
I believe that this time Janice is the only one who has signed up, and we do not have anyone here in the room that has signed up for public comment.
Okay. Next slide. All right, we're going to take a second to go over the meeting agenda for the day. We will spend the first half of our meeting hearing from 2 special guests who have responded to our invitation to share their experiences around the salary and elected office with us. We've asked them to speak for 5 to 10 minutes each to give us plenty of time to ask questions. Excuse me. Then the rest of the meeting, we will continue workshopping the methodology for how we set salaries before we open it up to public comment. Barb and Commissioner Engers will walk us through a bunch of slides on the different data sets we agreed upon last meeting, and we will begin the process of winnowing down what we want to keep and how we want to use the data that we do keep. Public comment is reserved for 15 minutes starting at 10:40. If no one shows up to comment, we will continue our discussion. Any questions about the agenda?
Just to clarify, it was 7:40, not 10:40. We will not be staying till 10:40. I've promised this commission we will not stay late.
Did I say 10:40? Oh, no. Anyway, okay. Now it's time to introduce our guests. Can I get the next slide? All right. I am very pleased that we have 2 guests tonight that have responded to our invitation to learn more about the impact of the salary community that members run and maintain political office. We're going to have a conversation with each guest one at a time so we can focus on our questions to each person individually. We've asked each of them to spend about 5 to 10 minutes sharing their experiences with us, and then we'll have 10 to 15 minutes for questions with each person. Jamie will keep us on time as we go. So let's start with Metro Council Duncan Wong. Councilor Wong, thank you so much for being here. We look very much forward to learning about your experiences. Take it away.
Courtney, would you mind taking the presentation down so we can have a discussion? Thank you.
Great. Hi, Jamie and Juan Carlos, and hi, commissioners. Thanks for your service and thanks for inviting me to talk about my experiences. Really happy to be here. And I'm just really excited to, make sure the transition and the salaries and the charter reform all works out as best it can for the public. So yeah, my name is Duncan Huang. I'm a Metro Councilor serving District 6. So that's Southeast and Southwest Portland. So geographically, it's like south of 84, and then from a Beaverton city limit to about 122nd Avenue. And at Metro, our salaries are set by law in our charter. So we're all part-time. And the Metro president makes the equivalent of a circuit court judge in Multnomah County, and the councilors make 1/3 of that. So last year it was about $53,000 for a Metro councilor. I also have a full-time job at APANO, the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon. This month I also celebrated my 10-year work anniversary there at APANO, and I'm able to make the 2 work because my day job allows a lot of flexibility. So I'm able to attend council Tuesdays, Thursdays, and have some various meetings basically on Thursday afternoons and a little bit on Friday. Having the 2 roles means I'm working generally about between 50 to 70 hours a week. And, being a nonprofit leader, I have a lot of like admin and grant writing time, which I actually do a lot in the evening or at night. And, if I have a big grant, I'll often pull an all-nighter, and I'm getting a little old to do all-nighters. But that's just kind of like how it works, having 2 roles. And it's at Metro, it's something that you can spend as much time as you want doing it. There's a multitude of challenges our region is facing. So really kind of, the work could, just go on forever, as I'm sure it could for city commissioners. So some kind of key takeaways that I would, share with you all are, I would support city commissioners making a full-time salary. I'm not sure exactly the dollar amount. I think that's up to you all, but just having the full-time salary will meet a lot of kind of practical and also equity goals. Paying folks full-time means they won't have potential conflicts of interest with other employment, whether it's in the private sector or, for a nonprofit. I was just looking up what it would cost to live in my district. And the average rent for a 2-bedroom in Portland is about $2,500. This is a couple months ago. And you need a salary of $101,171 to be able to afford it. For me, my district includes, the West Hills and inner Southeast Portland. So housing is quite expensive, and it would be virtually impossible for me to live in my district as a renter anywhere if I didn't have 2 jobs. I think if you're able to pay a full-time salary, folks won't burn out working multiple jobs and can really focus on serving, the city's constituents. And of course, we'll be able to recruit candidates of various backgrounds and experiences. For example, for Metro, for much of our 40-some year history, the council was largely, older white retirees. And those were the folks that had the time and financial ability to serve on council. So really wasn't until the last couple of years where we have a more younger and diverse representation. And, I think we're doing that despite kind of the salaries that Metro councilors have, just because, many of my colleagues have other jobs outside their roles. So yeah, as a local elected, there's an unlimited amount of work that you could do and events you can go to. But for me, kind of, as a local elected, but also as a constituent and a member of, this community, I really want to see my city commissioner be in the present in community as much as possible and be able to focus on their job. So yeah, that's kind of my experience and what I've been seeing in terms of like financial needs to be able to serve the people in our district. And I don't know if you want to open up the questions now or after the panel.
Thank you, Counselor. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Counselor Wong? We're going to give it a minute because I know there are. Commissioner Johnson.
Hi, thank you for coming. One thing I would want to reassure you is, and we've discussed this a little bit in the last couple of weeks, is according to the charter, these are full-time positions, and we are proceeding, as far as I understand it, under that mandate as we look at salaries. So
Okay.
we certainly are cognizant of the stresses and strains of trying to pursue government service in a part-time capacity, and the Charter Commission got there ahead of us. And as I understand it, the Metro councilors currently are full-time positions. So if that allays any of your concerns, I think I just wanted to say that as far as I understand it and that we've discussed, these are full-time positions and we have not looked at any other option.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification. That's great.
Are there other questions or comments or reflections from the commission? What's that? Oh. Someone try to speak.
I
Can we-
think you're on mute. Yeah.
Is it Commissioner Medras?
Commissioner Medras, yeah.
We'll give it a minute while you figure. No, we still can't hear you. Can we undo that? I think you're just highlighting it for us. I don't see it on mine. spotlight
Oh,
thing that you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
You still figuring out the mute, Commissioner Medras? Yeah, we can't hear you.
You can always type it in.
You could join by phone. Is there anyone else while Commissioner Medras is figuring that out?
Sure, I can ask a question. You said that you're getting a little old to do both. If you had to pick one, which one would you pick?
That's a great question. You know, I find a lot of meaning in both. I'm getting too old to like pull all-nighters now. That's the main thing. Gosh, you know, I feel like I make different impacts at both my roles. Kind of one's really immediately on the ground, and one's, you know, in kind of a larger policy setting kind of role. So that's a good question. I think I'd have to, you know, think a lot about it, and also, you know, look at kind of like the salary that each would offer as a full-time role. So it's, you know, I think it's there would be a lot of different factors to decide upon. So I couldn't say right now exactly.
It sounded like a very interview question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cooney?
Hi there. Thank you so much for coming today. It's really valuable to hear your perspective. I know you said that this is considered part-time and that you basically can offer up as much time as you realistically are able with all the issues. Is there an expectation that was set for kind of the minimum of what you would be expected to do for that salary for the role by chance?
Yeah, and I would say, you know, Metro has evolved a lot over the decades, and you know, there was a pretty good period of time where it was pretty sleepy, and I felt, you know, it seemed like from a policy choice that that 1/3 time salary for a part-time position made sense when we were focused mainly on long-range planning and land use and urban growth boundary. But you know, in recent years, we've added, you know, parks, regional parks, along with that, and then over the last 10 years, kind of adding on the housing portfolio, so the affordable housing measure at the regional level, and then now supportive housing. So you know, adding kind of these additional responsibilities on top of what Metro was, you know, just even 10 years ago. Has really expanded the scope, and also, you know, now working in, you know, housing and homelessness services, like there's just so much that needs to be done. So I feel like our charter has not really adapted to kind of the current circumstances and scope that Metro now has. Sorry, what was your original question?
No, that's okay. So I'm trying to get some perspective on, you know, you gave us a sense of what the salary is,
Oh,
and then
yes.
just, you know, what that FTE you know, expectation
Yeah.
would be, knowing that it's flexible and that you are putting a lot more hours than, you know,
Well, I
that
mean, I
might
think,
outline.
you know, yeah, thanks. Minimally, you know, we have council from 10:30 to 1 on Tuesday, Thursdays. And then there's, you know, prep time for that. And then we all each have our committee assignments, whether it's like MPAC or JPAC or our placemaking committee, our TOD committee. So each counselor probably has 5 to 6 kind of additional assignments. And then, you know, when we have campaign season, you know, not only for us as electeds, but we have to renew regional measures like the housing bond or the parks bond or a parks levy, then the counselors all play a major role in working on those campaigns because staff aren't allowed to. So I think I would say for campaigns, when we have things on the ballot, you know, it's much more than 20 hours because we're out campaigning and fundraising. But you know, it kind of comes in waves and cycles. But I think, you know, minimally,
That little phone thing.
yeah, minimally like 15 to 20 hours of meeting prep time, and then however much, research you want to do, or community engagement, if you want to hold forums or attend community events, that all, adds up. So oftentimes we're pretty selective on what things we can and can't attend. But if I had more time, I'd go to more things.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Sampson, and then Commissioner Medress, I believe you have joined by phone. We were just logistically trying to make sure that was ready. So you can go after Commissioner Sampson.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your perspective and more about the roles at Metro. I was curious if you're able to point to anything that might attribute to, you said in more recent years, you've had more success in seeing younger and more diverse candidates. And I was just curious if there was, anything that shifted or changed that helped with that, or if it was purely out of necessity and those people are also out working multiple jobs but want to give back to the community, or if there was something specific that maybe shifted as well.
I don't think there's anything that's structurally changed, especially within Metro. The hours or salaries didn't substantially change in any way. I think it's just that, community and community organizations have just placed a stronger emphasis on, recruiting and having candidates that more reflect their communities. So yeah, I mean, we have the youngest and most diverse council we've ever had at Metro, and lots of first time first time there's a Chinese American on council, for example, in my case, and I think it's just that there's more interest in public service. So yeah, I'm certainly not doing the work for the paycheck, but I think that there's just been more interest in kind of what Metro is doing as an agency, and then just kind of a broader kind of support network for like first time candidates like myself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor, for being here. Sorry for my audio issues. I'm in a different setup and I have no idea how things work here. I wanted to ask, so in addition to what Commissioner Johnson was sharing around it, we know it's a full-time position by virtue of the charter. We also know that the future counselors will not have any other income viability options because it will be the sole income will come from this job. Knowing that you have a full-time job at Apano, any thoughts on what would it have taken for you to leave your job at Apano and join and run for council? Because we're also grappling with the fact that you have to leave a job and not make any other income and not continue on in your career. So if you are an example of a younger, more diverse generation that this commission is trying to attract, what would need to have been true for you to leave your Apano job and do a counselor job?
Yeah, and I might add too that I took a different role at Apano from kind of being one of our co-executives to a program director. So that was part of my decision making here. But I felt like what is currently being offered to current city commissioners now is a fair salary. I understand it's probably not as intense not having to manage bureaus, but I think somewhere in that range would be fair. I mean, we definitely want folks to be able to afford to live in the districts they represent and not have other incomes. And like I said, I think the 102,000 to 130,000 sort of salary range is I think a fair kind of compensation for the type of work and the number of hours that I believe that the city commissioners would have. And that would make it attractive enough to, you know, be able to pay my bills and also, yeah, like leave previous, you know, roles and jobs.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for the counselor before we invite our next guest to speak?
And happy to stick around for a bit longer too for Hannah. So
Yes,
I'll be
please.
around. Good, thank you.
I think that would be much appreciated. Commissioner Gill, do you want to?
Yep. Well, thank you, Councillor Huang. It was a nice time to hear from a former state rep. Now it is time to hear from a former state representative, Teresa Alonso Leon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Good afternoon, salary commissioners and other very important folks who are going to be making some very important decisions. My name is Teresa Alonso Leon. I am former state legislator for House District 22, representing Woodburn through the north part of Salem. I was elected to the House of Representatives in 2016 and started my term in 2017, becoming the first Indigenous immigrant Latina legislator in the history of our state. I know that becoming an elected official would mean making many sacrifices, but I didn't realize that I would need to sacrifice my life savings as well. State legislators are citizenry elected officials, and we're supposed to work part-time, but that's not so. In my previous job, I was working for the state as the high school CONCE and GED administrator, making almost $80,000 a year. And in my first year as a legislator, I made $24,000 salary that year. So as you can imagine, I had to use my savings to offset the cost of my new financial reality. That set me up for what the remainder of my terms would be like. Well, we also got per diems of $151 a day during session. That meant 1 year it was $151 per diem for 6 months because we had long session. And the following year, it would be for 35 days. So we had to constantly budget ourselves. And while I mentioned we were part-time, it's very unrealistic for many of us who were first-time legislators to think that we could do this work part-time. I did open up my consulting company, Paracata Consulting, so I could take on some jobs. But the truth of the matter is this work requires full time. I want to share with you a couple stories around this idea that as legislators, we do have similar work that we all do. We all work on passing policy. We all work in community. We all do very similar things. But because I am bilingual, I am very rooted in community. I have always been accessible to folks. It made it really easy for me to represent my district. But not only that, folks from across the state would reach out to my office because I spoke Spanish or because I look like many of them. And that meant that I couldn't turn them away because maybe their state legislator didn't speak their language or look like them or made themselves accessible. And so I would often work in partnership with my colleagues to problem solve. Which meant that I'm actually doing more work. So there's this idea of invisible labor that a lot of people don't really understand when it comes to folks of color with a set of skills that they bring into a job. And it's not just me. There's many jobs where people are interpreting and not getting paid for it, or it's not being recognized. One of the things that I worked really hard behind the scenes was to make the Capitol building language accessible so that folks from all communities could come to the Capitol, give testimony, and know that there would be an interpreter if they requested one. So that was one of the things that I did in addition to working with community and helping community members from all parts of the state. So making $24,000 a year salary to $33,000 a year salary when I left is not viable and it's not sustainable. And I'm really happy to hear that is not your intent. You're not going to be paying city commissioners that much. That makes me happy. And it also makes me happy that it is identified as a full-time job, because this is a full-time job. Even if it were part-time, I mean, Duncan Wang mentioned he technically had 2 full-time jobs. It is not easy to have to balance all of that. And I also want to make sure that there's other considerations that you might also consider in that when we're looking at diversifying leadership body and they have diverse areas of expertise, that you also or that they also have an opportunity to hire diverse languages and diverse skills in their staffing, so that one city commissioner is not being pulled, their staff is not being pulled to come and help another city commissioner with language access or interpretation or translation, because that happened to my staff in my first year. And then I made an announcement during one of our meetings and said, for next year, I would love if all my colleagues could hire bilingual staff, because it is not the job of my staff to support your staff in respect to translation and interpretation services, because that makes it more work for my staff and for me. There's a lot of single parents out there who, for many reasons want to give to community, but it is challenging when you have children and, right now we're experiencing childcare deserts, and the cost of childcare is through the roof. So paying an equitable, sustainable salary is going to be really important. And now, we're also hearing a lot around parent care. A lot of us have parents who we have to care for. So, we need to be able to afford that as well, or the cost of having somebody come and watch our elderly parents. And also some simple things as transportation. I know for me as an elected official, because of what I was making for the last 6 years, I couldn't upgrade my car. I actually have been driving my 1999 Toyota Tacoma since my undergraduate years, and making $24,000 a year or even $33,000 a year didn't allow me to buy a new car that I hope would not break down at some point. So these are things that I think is really important to consider as you're, as you're looking at how much does a city commissioner or how much they should make, because there's a lot of factors that go into, what makes it equitable for everybody. And also recognizing their talents and what additional work they may be doing because of those additional talents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments or reflections you'd like to provide? Commissioner Cooney?
Hi there. Thank you so much again to you also for sharing your perspective and coming today. Okay, sorry, I think I just lost it. Wait a moment. I also wanted to just thank you for the nod to single parents. I'm one myself, and so I do appreciate that as well. So I know that the roles of our commissioners will be changing, with this reorganization. And a lot of that, from my understanding, is that they will be more embedded in communities, that they are going to be engaging more with communities. It sounds to me like as part of your role, that was a huge part of it. I'm just wondering if you have some perspective on just kind of the amount of time that takes, the effort, just what, I know you were talking about some of that being invisible labor, especially somebody who is speaking another language, representing, a person of color. I would love to get just a little bit more perspective on that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I would say for me, as an example, I grew up in Woodburn. So people already knew me before I became a legislator. And you're, as a legislator, an elected official, you're never done working. You can go grocery shopping, but people are going to come up to you and they're going to talk to you and they're going to give you ideas. Before we passed the driver's license law, my neighbors would walk to the grocery store, and on their way to the grocery store, they would say, "Hey, Rep. Alonso, remember, we need driver's license. Are we going to work on it this coming session?" And so, I would have those many discussions with them in Spanish, because a lot of my constituents are Spanish speakers. And then, one of the things that is also important to acknowledge here in Woodburn, and for you all, actually the different areas of Portland, people speak multiple languages. You're not just talking about the top three. Your top three could be completely different, but we know Spanish is huge there. But when I ran for office the first time, I was the first candidate to run a multilingual campaign, Spanish, English, and Russian, because we have a large All Believers community here. And so it's really important when you're thinking about what kind of activities you're going to do in community, that you have those interpreters ready to be there, whether it's American Sign Language, Spanish, and maybe your top three languages, so that folks know that if they're going to come to your event, they're going to be seen and they're going to be heard. And, and the other thing that I learned is, obviously, you never want to cut off anybody, even if you're going over time in a meeting, because it takes a lot of energy and time for folks. It's not normal for typical constituents to go to an event. It's scary if you've never done it. You don't know what to expect, especially our communities of color, or maybe they've had bad experience before with other electeds, and this is their first time coming back. So you want to create a very positive event where you have folks greeting people, where people are speaking different languages. So a lot of thought and preparation goes into having events like that. So I really appreciate your question, Commissioner Cooney, because it does take you thinking about, okay, what are the top three languages in this area of my district? And, do I need to hire the staffing to make sure we have enough language speakers? Our marketing material, whether it's online or whether we have flyers or mailers, that they are in a couple languages, so to make sure people came out. So there's a lot of thought and consideration that maybe non-English speakers don't think about, or having childcare or having snacks. Those things bring people to events.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Sampson.
Thank you. I actually don't even have a specific question. I really just wanted to say thank you for sharing all of your lived experiences. I think all the examples were so helpful and even brought up things that I haven't even given thought to, because I haven't been through many of those myself. And then one reflection or thing that you pointed out that really stuck with me was that especially, a lot of these roles being considered part-time, not at the city, but elsewhere, that it's unrealistic for first-time legislators to do that in a part-time capacity, people who don't have the background. And I just found that to be incredibly helpful and important when you think about trying to get more diverse legislators across all forms of government, that does mean bringing in people who have less experience, and being part-time does seem very unrealistic on many levels, but particularly for what you shared. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comments.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? I just want to note that I know Commissioner Martinez Alicea regrets not being here and really wanted to also hear and engage with you on this question. She had unplanned issues tonight and couldn't make it, but I think she would also be very interested in this conversation about the additional qualities that you are bringing to this service when you come from with kind of diverse background, different languages. The reflection you made about how it's not just about the role that you're in, but you serve lots of different roles because of that is a really important, I think, reflection that Commissioner Martinez Alicea has also been trying to bring to the table. Commissioner Angers.
We heard one, I would maybe run for this kind of role range. What would the kind of range that you'd like to see? What would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think Duncan mentioned anything over 130,000. I think it sounds fair, but I don't live in Portland, and I know the cost of living in Portland is a lot higher than the cost of living here in the Mid-Willamette Valley. However, taking into consideration, different family circumstances, I think is really important. Definitely their skill set, what they're bringing, whether they're single parents or not, with childcare and parent care. I think there's a lot of things that would cause somebody to want to run for a position but can't because they can't afford to. And that was pretty clear when I chose to run for Congress and was trying to recruit folks to run for my seat. And everybody was excited to run. And then when I talked to them about the salary, they all stepped back and said, I can't afford to leave my job and take on that level of responsibility and only make this much. So I think that it has to be a very healthy salary. I always think about it from a family perspective. Can your family live off of what you're making? And can you put a little something for emergencies? If you can't put money aside for emergencies, then you're not making enough. Because emergencies do happen. And when you have a family, I think, I don't know, I can speak for all of us, but I still have a pretty big student loan and I have a mortgage. So that, emergency, they all come, and being able to save a little for that, I think is a good indicator. Living in anxiety because you can't afford the job you have is something that we all shouldn't have to struggle with, especially when you're giving back to community.
I think that I don't see any other hands. So I just want to reflect that I think that's also, oh, Councilor Wong, please.
Oh, yes. In addition to salary, I was wondering if the commission had kind of any purview on some of the benefits that might also make things attractive. I think for some of my colleagues, like having on-site childcare, or at least maybe a childcare stipend, or if it's like if there's a salary, but there's also a housing stipend, given how expensive we know some districts, especially in Portland, are. Those might be part of a compensation package as well. And I don't know if it's just purely salary, or are you talking about kind of holistically the whole compensation and benefit package?
It is exclusively salary, but they become City of Portland employees and have access to the benefits of the City of Portland as employees there. I wanted to reflect something that you also said, Teresa, about saving for the future, because our charter does require that if you get elected, you cannot even hold a business that you maybe have or worked on. You have to give up all of those other assets. And we've had former commissioners who have had a business for 20 years, had to give it up to, you know, be in this position and to provide public service. And then once you're unelected, what do you have, right? So that is a very important point about being able to think about the future after. We have about 10 more minutes. Is there any more conversation or discussion to be had? We can also ask our invited guests if they have any final thoughts to provide to us before we move on to the rest of our agenda.
I'll just say that I just want to thank you all for joining this commission and helping decide the salary of future city commissioners. It's a very important job. And I read all of your bios, so I'm really appreciative of the diverse backgrounds that you all are coming from and being able to provide feedback. And just want to say thank you. There's a lot of appreciation for people who take time to give back to community, and you're doing it in this way. So thank you.
Great. Yes, I'd like to echo that too. I think we all have such a huge interest in getting this right. So thanks for volunteering your time. And also, I guess my one closing thought I had was just also how are we going to adjust for inflation and things like that in the future? I think the city does cost of living, but like, you know, I wouldn't want you know, the overall compensation to erode over time if we're not thinking about that, and then us kind of being back here in like 10 years. And yeah, so just like how are we managing for that? And that would be an important consideration as well. Thanks.
Commissioner Johnson.
I think, and again, I'm free to be, anyone can correct me, but I believe that every 2 years, this commission in some format is put together. It won't necessarily be us, but they will have an independent salary commission who will come back in and review wages every 2 years for the council, the mayor, and the auditor's position, so that they can do real-time costing and make sure that the wages stay in line with not only the workload, but also you know, the market. And so there is a plan forward, although it may not include us specifically. There will be another commission in 2 years, which, you know, will give us an opportunity also as collectively to see what, if we make mistakes or don't quite get it right, people won't have to wait too long before it gets corrected or looked at again.
Oh, everything. That's great.
Yeah. Not me, it was the Charter Commission.
Okay, well, Commissioner Gill, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, so I really wanted to thank you both for coming. I think I found it personally very useful, and I will probably think a lot about it as we go through the next process. We should move on to the next section of tonight's agenda. Our guests are welcome to stay for the meeting if you wish. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie to move us into the next discussion.
Thank you. You start? It looks strange. Okay. Does it look strange on your end?
I think it's truncated. Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, thanks again to our guests. It's hard to transition into data after such a really wonderful conversation. Really appreciate that. And again, we'll be inviting additional guests in the future, in the next couple meetings, as you have requested, to again have a broad conversation with members of the public about their experiences. So On to our next steps tonight, and they are, our next steps are really to take a slow and deliberate approach to walking through each piece of data that you've asked for to inform your methodology. So Barb and Commissioner Angers are going to team up to guide you through a conversation of the data. And the goal of doing this is to make some intentional decisions with each piece of data so that you can arrive at some specific criteria that can be used to create a draft salary range. So the questions that Commissioner Angers is going to help you come to for each of the slides are, first, do you want to keep or discard this piece of data? And two, if you want to keep the data, what criteria does this data inform? So for example, when reviewing the living wage versus thriving wage data, you might choose to set a criteria that says, as a commission, you agree that you will not go above a thriving wage for a 2-wage earner family of 4 or below a living wage for a single wage earner family of 3. It's obviously just an example, but you see what I'm saying. So I really want to encourage you all to take your time. We do not need to get through all the data sets tonight. You can deliberate as much as you need to on this part, but we will definitely end at 8 p.m. So wherever we are by 7:55 is where we will pick up next time. And obviously we will also break at 7:40 to take public comment before resuming again for whatever time remains. Also, I believe that Barb and Commissioner Angers are going to start us off with a discussion about kind of the guiding principles for the methodology. So does anyone have questions about this process before I turn it over to Barb and Commissioner Angers? Just giving it a minute, just in case. Not seeing any hands. Okay. Then next slide, please. Thank you so much. Barb and Commissioner Angers, take it away.
Thank you. This is Barb, and I will just let you know that the next series of slides on the methodology is something that BHR put together. And it's just a summary of the data that we have provided you already to sort of act as a kind of memory jog, and you are more than welcome to refer to the full information that you were provided along the way that has the full data sets available to you. So the next slides are really just summaries of that information. But before we get to the data that you've requested over the last few weeks, we thought that it might be helpful to start and agree on a sort of guiding principle that you can always refer back to as you sort of sink into what the numbers mean, what the information means. And this guiding principle that's been drafted here on this slide is really just something that we've heard consistently from commissioners, sort of explicitly expressed that the pay should not prevent anyone from running and holding office, and that pay should be made or set in a fiscally responsible way. So that appeared to be sort of the main values of the commission in this endeavor. So it's just a draft. It's written here for you to think about and discuss.
And these are based on the values that we discussed in the last couple meetings around anti-racism, equity, fiscal responsibility, and then transparency, communication, and collaboration is like the way that we do them. And for me, I think the first line makes sense, and that sounds great. The second line about pay being fiscally responsible, I would love to hear other commissioners' thoughts on what fiscal responsibility could look like. Or do we love it as it is? Commissioner Johnson, I see your hand.
I appreciate your comment because I'm not exactly sure what that means either. Fiscally responsible, it sounds good, but realistically, as I think I've mentioned in the past, generally that would be within the guidelines of a budget, an overall budget in an organization that you would be looking at and trying to determine how to set wages based on, you know, the work or what you have available to spend. And so it's hard for me to kind of do this in a vacuum. And so one of the things that goes through my head periodically is there are whatever we decide, then a budget will be developed by the city. Or are there things that the city won't be able to afford to do based on what we recommend? And then it will be obviously their issue to struggle with in terms of how they manage their budget. But I'm not sure how we're defining fiscal responsibility unless we use the data that we've gotten and that we will maybe continue to gather to show how we come up with it. But I have a hard time just defining that myself. So thank you for that. And that's my thought, which isn't very helpful, but that's what I think.
No, I think that's great. That was something I struggled with as well. And Commissioner Cooney, do you have a?
Yeah, I appreciate both of you talking about that. I'm realizing as you're saying that it does feel a little challenging to use that term. I'm wondering if we need to consider something a little different. It's our responsibility to the public. It's our responsibility to candidates. So is fiscally responsible the right term? At first glance, I thought it was perfect. And now as you're definitely making me think of it from a different perspective. So thank you. I don't have an answer, but I appreciate the thoughtfulness.
Commissioner Gill?
Yeah, so I mean, when we were talking about this in our smaller meeting, you know, you were talking about one is one end and one is the other end, and you kind of wanted to have a bound. So like the pay should not be deterrent, but maybe the other bound is pay should be an encouragement as well. And maybe that's the other bound. So it's encouraging people that may not otherwise run, but we want their voices to be heard and be part of the community. So maybe it's an encouragement in a way. I don't know how to phrase that exactly, but.
Yeah, that it shouldn't be just a minimum, like not a deterrent. So it's like, oh, you could pay the bills, but that there should be something like more to
Yeah.
it. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe we need to workshop the first sentence as well.
No, sorry.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yeah, I think what we could say something to the effect that it will occur, the pay will encourage more people to participate and to run for office, and that we believe that we have put together a fair wage, but we have to be careful. It starts getting very complicated if we try to people make decisions and sacrifices to go into government service for a lot of different reasons, and I think we have to be careful again that we are able to say, you know, again, the fiscal responsibility thing is the piece that I think we want to encourage people, but we also have to recognize that the city has a lot of demands on it, and we want to be cognizant of all those demands, including for their regular employees who are also part of the budgetary concern. And I don't know, I don't have a great answer here, but I think what we want is something that encourages more people to explore and to imagine being able to hold public office, who for one reason or another have not been able to envision it, either through financial obstacles or because of a lack of encouragement or opportunity. And that doesn't deal with the fiscal responsibility, but it does open up what we really want and it forms it in a more positive way rather than not a deterrent to holding office. Because I think that anybody can say, well, it's a deterrent because I'm not going to make the money I'm making now. But I think what we want to do is to people to imagine the possibilities of being able to hold office and participate in a way they couldn't in the past, because we have been able to structure these things along with the rest of the charter pieces, which is keeping it local, cutting down the costs for running for office, And it's just one piece of imagining more people being able to see themselves in these roles. I don't know.
Yeah,
that-
I like the sentence about encouraging more people to participate. I think that is like, as you said, not framing it so much as a negative, but framing it from a positive perspective. And Commissioner Cooney, I see your hand.
Yeah, I like that as well. I was just thinking if we wanted to say something like pay should encourage diverse involvement and representation, something like that.
I like that.
Could we combine them? Pay should encourage diverse representation and participation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's good. I keep thinking of the power of imagination here and people being able to imagine and see themselves in these roles where they couldn't in the past because of obstacles. And pay is one of them. There are a number of them that have kept a lot of people, both diverse and other communities. I mean, younger people who may not be necessarily a diverse candidate, but who haven't been able to see themselves in these roles because they have loans to pay or they don't have the power of imagination, which is what I think what we should be thinking of. This is a better and higher way of being able to give people an imagination of seeing themselves in a role that is meaningful, gives back to community, and yet is affordable. I don't know. I'm just kind of spinning. This is the kind of stuff I would normally do on paper and not bore people with it, talking about it. I would just write a bunch of stuff and send it off and see what people thought. So I just think I'd like to see just a little bit higher level of thinking in terms of, for me, it is giving people a way of thinking about participating in community and engaging in a public sense where they couldn't see it before for themselves.
So maybe instead of pay should not be a deterrent, that pay will remove obstacles. Like if that's like I understand your point about imagination, but like if the thing that people are running up against is an obstacle, like the pay can remove the obstacle. Commissioner Cooney, let's see your hand.
I know on my side, I actually like that sense that it should not be a deterrent to holding office, because for me, it's that feels like a helpful reminder. And then alongside the, like, we can kind of start there as like, it should not be this, it should be this. I kind of like the idea of having both of those as kind of bookends to, I know for me that felt like a really strong sentence, and it feels like a good place to kind of like ground me in how I'm reviewing information. So personally, I think that's helpful.
Okay, so pay will not be a deterrent and will remove obstacles. Commissioner Johnson, does that solve what you're looking for?
I think removing obstacles in there may be many obstacles. It won't necessarily remove the obstacles. I think
That pay would not be an obstacle, or that a lot of things like maybe childcare or like you know, having to consider not having like those kind of obstacles that pay would address.
Yeah, I think pay will open up, pay should open opportunities and encourage people to pursue office without economic or the economic barriers, traditional economic barriers or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of.
Pay to assist removing obstacles. So I don't think it can remove all obstacles, but
Nothing will remove all obstacles now.
Okay, what
Right?
I'm hearing, pay will not be a deterrent and will open opportunities.
Yeah, I think we'll open opportunities and not be, I like the positive first. It opens up opportunities.
Participation.
Yeah. And not necessarily be a deterrent to holding office.
Okay, pay will open opportunities and not be a deterrent. Do we like that? And I see a hand, Juan Carlos.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to suggest an idea to, I like the wording that is being suggested, and my further suggestion would be to name for whom it, to be explicit about for whom the opportunities would be open. Because I think that what I'm not hearing in your conversation as good and substantial as it is the reference of to who has been left out from the political process. What are the communities that haven't had traditionally representation in city council, in their elected officials in the city of Portland? And I think that the opening opportunities or removing barriers or obstacles is great. And I think it's also make it more powerful to name and be consider being more explicit about to whom it would open those opportunities for. And my suggestion also is if we decide to be more explicit about that, to use language of marginalized communities, because I think that is the crux of the matters. Like some communities have been pushed to the margins, as the word says, and not being, and their voices, they haven't been elected and their voices haven't been centered in the governance of the city. So yeah, I just wanted to suggest that.
So that would be, to double check your wording, pay will open opportunities for historically marginalized communities and not be a deterrent. Does that reflect what you were? Okay. Awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Cooney?
Sorry, never mind. I don't need to now. That sounds great. I appreciate that input.
Yes, thank you very much for that input. Does anyone else have anything to add for the first line at least? Do we feel like that? And I could. And then what are our thoughts on fiscal responsibility?
What do we actually mean when we say fiscally responsible?
Well, that is one of our values.
Uh-huh.
That's where the wording came from originally. And that came from the original charter.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Sampson?
Wondering if we can word it to something like pay analysis or compensation analysis will take fiscal responsibility into consideration where appropriate or where we're able to. I think it can mean a lot of different things, and it might not be something for us right here, right now, but like when you think about how we set the initial wages and then say we recommend that, or we say going forward that the commission or the council members and mayor should get a cost of living adjustment. But we find ourselves in another COVID situation. And if city employees aren't getting a cost of living adjustment, then our proposal to the city would also cover that elected officials are not getting it. So I don't know that we can perfectly address fiscal responsibility in the moment or right now, but if we can, I think just the fact that we're all aware of it and we're aware that based on public comments so far, most have been about being fiscally responsible while offering salaries that allow these positions to attract more diverse candidates. So I think it's okay to give a nod to it. And maybe it's just a matter of how we reword it.
Commissioner Greeny?
So I know in some of our conversations, we've talked about responsibility both to the idea of the budget, to the public, and then also to the elected officials. I don't know if we want to try to expand that statement to kind of acknowledge that in some way. So like pay should be set with responsibility to the public and elected officials in mind, something like that. I don't know if that really starts to get us towards that idea of what fiscal responsibility would be within our scope, but with that.
No, it's great. Like, who are we responsible to? I like that frame. Are there any other, the budget, public, and elected officials, are there any other folks that we should be responsible toward? Okay. Well, the second principle sounds like pay should be fiscally responsible to the budget or the city's budget, the public, and elected officials. Does that wording sound okay? Commissioner Johnson, I saw that face, and if you have
Yeah.
something nicer, I would love to tweak it.
Sorry, I don't have anything to suggest to them on it. I'm trying to think of somehow that we put in there that pay is, we're being responsible. I don't know how we say that we're being somewhere in here, if we could put something in there that demonstrates that we are examining a range of data, that in order to be fiscally responsible, we will be probably, this is probably just as good. I hesitate. I don't want it to be long and drawn out. I'm not sure that being fiscally responsible to something, I'm not sure how that works in terms of the public. I think we should be fiscally responsible. I think that's probably enough, because to our constituents are the public and elected officials, and the budget isn't really that's not a constituency, it's a thing. And we just, I guess we'll let the budget worry about itself when it gets there. That's somebody else's problem, is the overall budget. I just wonder about, because there are so many new positions. I mean, when we go from what we have now to 12, and that dollar figure goes way up, I just get a little concerned about people thinking that we just we're not really thinking about the implications of all of the pay. And I want to be able to say, this is data driven. This isn't being developed in a vacuum. We've been responsible, but we don't have a budget to be responsible to, because we don't have a budget. So we want to be responsible when we're letting the data and our background research drive how we make fiscally responsible decisions.
Commissioner Gill, did you change your mind?
No, I got booted out of the thing. So I'm going to turn off my camera for now, because I think my internet is not liking me. So I missed the last minute of what was said, but I wanted just to make a comment about being it data driven, that we wanted to say something about it being data driven, but I don't know if that's relevant anymore. So anyway.
I think the wording around was examining a range of data, and that allows us to be looking at both numbers as well as not numbers. Okay, and we can tweak the wording, but it sounds like we're coming to a place where it's how we're being fiscally responsible, and to what or to whom that we are being fiscally responsible, that those parts should both be in there.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Jamie, do we vote? Do we move on?
Well, I think that's up to you. It sounds like there's still maybe some nuancing of the language that the co-chairs may want to do and bring back to this body to consider at the next meeting. Sounds like you've provided enough of the range. I think this conversation went really well, because I almost had to remind folks about the difference between desired outcomes and values, and that principles are really about setting the fencing, right? The in between of the salary range. So I think you did a really good job navigating that and arrived at some potential language. Juan Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, I think along the lines of what Jamie was mentioning, I also wanted to offer another suggestion, which is to put this in the context of the 6 core values that the city of Portland adopted in 2020, and fiscal responsibility is one of them, together with equity, anti-racism, transparency, communication, and collaboration. So I think that what reminded me of this is the question, which I think is extremely well taken, of to whom is this being fiscally responsible? And I think the one way, if we use the framing, or if you use the framing of the 6 city values, it's been responsible or upholding the values that the city has adopted as a whole. And I think the part that is tricky is when you have potentially different, which value takes prevalence, and I don't necessarily think that that's the framing, but there could be a situation in which if you want to focus or if you want to emphasize fiscal responsibility, you may end up also not emphasizing equity and anti-racism or transparency. So I think that that's a potential pitfall, but I think that considering all those 6 values together with the principles that you're working with and the desired outcomes globally, it might be, I think it will be a great exercise. I think that one thing that I've heard community members say, which always strikes the deep, it touches with me very deeply, is that the perspective that the budget is a moral document as much as a technical document, because the budget should ideally uphold the values of the organization that creates that budget. So the budget should reflect those values. So so I just wanted to mention.
Commissioner Johnson.
Just a quick question. Are we is the expectation we're going to give a pay range, or is it a specific salary?
I believe that is up to you, how you want to draft your salary proposal. I can check with our city attorneys. I'm not sure I know for sure the answer to that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That was just a little thing that popped into my brain there. Sorry.
And I want to thank Juan Carlos for his comments, and also Juan Carlos, who'd be happy to know that this body has thought deeply about those values and has prioritized them in terms of equity, anti-racism, and fiscal responsibility as kind of the 3 primary, and have set their methodology framework around those particular values. And so what you'll be seeing us move forward with tonight is how the different data sets apply to those different values and inform those values for the commission to set their criteria for the methodology. So are we in agreement that we feel like there was been enough workshopping on this particular issue, guiding principle? The co-chairs have.
Do you want me to go through them one more time? And if anyone has any questions or concerns? Okay. And I'm hearing the third, there might be a third principle. Thank you, Juan Carlos, that pay should reflect the city of Portland's values around anti-racism, equity, transparency, communication, collaboration, and fiscal responsibility. Did I get all the 6? Is that all 6? Okay, so the first guiding principle is that pay will open opportunities for historically marginalized communities and will not be a deterrent to running and holding office. The second principle is pay should be based on examining a range of data and consider the city's budget, the public, and the elected officials. And the third principle should be pay should reflect the city of Portland's values around anti-racism, equity, transparency, communication, collaboration, and fiscal responsibility. Does everyone feel comfortable with those guiding principles as they're written? Commissioner Cooney?
I'm just wondering what the second one, I like the responsibility side of it. So I'm wondering if we want to put that back in as examining a range of data and considering responsibility to the city's budget, the public and the elected officials. That would be my only feedback.
Pay should be, pay should be fiscally responsible and based on, is that what you're? I'm not sure I heard the wording.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so pay should be based on examining a range of data and considering responsibility to the city's budget, the public, and the elected officials. I don't know if that really fits or makes sense, but I did like the responsibility side there.
Maybe pay should be responsible and based on, or by being based on.
It might not be necessary. That might just be me. So it might just get a little too wordy.
I agree that it's an important thing to keep in mind. But I also heard Commissioner Johnson's thought that about being responsible to or what or whom.
Yeah.
Um,
It's hard to be responsible to a budget that we are not, that's not part of our portfolio. I mean, by the same token, we have to also think about when we're looking at pay, I think we also have to look at the data that we have, which is a lot, considerable, both local and regional and comps and all kinds of things. So I'm good. I'm fine. Whatever, the last one was fine with me. It's just hard to be responsible to a budget because it's not a thing. And we don't have one. So
that's very fair. Very fair. Yes, thank you.
well, maybe it could be pay should be based on examining a range of data, be fiscally responsible, and consider the city's budget, public, and elected officials. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Okay, I see a thumbs up. I see 2 thumbs up.
Oh, you sent mine in earlier.
I see 3 thumbs up. Okay, we're good.
Another one.
Okay. Okay. Well, Jamie, I think we have wording.
Wow, what a
We've
great discussion.
workshopped.
That's wonderful. Before we move on to the next slide, I guess I want to be a little more responsive to Commissioner Johnson's question about what you will be setting. And I think that there is a variety of options you can choose from. You could, as a body, come up with a very specific number and go out to community, because as you remember, in June, you will be releasing your draft proposal to the community to get feedback. So in knowing that, you could very well set a very specific number to try and get feedback about that. You could decide to offer a range and ask for community feedback about where within this range would be most appropriate. Or you could set a differential pay model based on characteristics or some other for some other reasons. So I think there are a variety of ways in which you can approach setting those salaries, again, with the intention of going out into community to get additional feedback before you make those final decisions.
And one quick question there is that once we get that feedback, when we give this to when we approve our budget and we give it to the council, are we going to give them latitude if there's a range? If we end up with a range and not a specific number, do we give them then the latitude of determining within the range where those salaries will be set? Or do we give them a finite number and say, this is what these salaries are?
That is a great question that I will need to confer with city attorneys about. My understanding is that you need to set a number, whether that be a differential pay model or a specific number. What I was referring to about a range was more about going out into community to identify where within a range the community members would be comfortable. But I will follow up with our city attorney and find out if you do have that latitude.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like we're ready to move to the next slide. Take it away, Barb.
Great. So the information on this next slide is kind of a summary of the data that you have requested over the last few weeks, broken out into two headings that may or may not be helpful. We have, for the rest of this session, we have slides for each one of these data sets that you've asked about. And so the idea is that we will go through each one at a time. So we can move on to the next slide. So one of the earlier items that was presented to the commission was an article about anti-oppressive pay, and that article you would have among your materials, but it talked about, gave some guidance around setting pay structures and what were kind of some pitfalls and some useful things to think about. The article talked about leveling jobs into, for example, senior or level 1, 2, and 3, and talked about how that could be problematic. Talked about issues around paying jobs with different functions differently. For example, manual labor versus white collar jobs. There was talk about performance pay, for example, merit systems, and where there might be bias in those systems. Talked about the value of transparency in determining pay, and talked about or sort of warned against a heavy reliance on market pay, and sort of encouraged including a robust benefits packet along with pay. So that was sort of an overarching bit of information that was provided to you initially.
Yes, and I think with each of these data points that we as a commission are going to answer the questions that Jamie mentioned. The first being, do we want to keep or discard this data? And then if we do keep the data, what of our principles or criteria is it working towards? And I think for me personally, the part about this article around market pay would probably be the most relevant to our work, just in terms of like if other jobs are already being underpaid or undervalued, or they're not taking in the same factors that we're taking in, that is something to think about. So I would say for at least that part of this article is helpful. I don't know if anyone else had different comments, different thoughts. Okay. Since I'm not hearing any objections, it sounds like for this part, it informs the second principle that we have, and that we can just kind of have it in the back of our minds under advisement. Barb, take it away.
Well,
Great, so I think we-
hold on. Are we moving to another slide? Is that what's happening, Commissioner Ingers?
I think so, yes.
Okay, well, let me put a pause on that. What I didn't hear, and maybe I'm just not listening very well, what is the specific criteria that you are going to use as an application to a salary proposal? So what, like, I'm thinking of a specific sentence. So, the commission will use market pay as, I don't know what, but there needs to be a specific criteria set for this particular data set.
Think we'll have to tweak the language, but it will be something around that market pay won't dictate what we decide on. That we'll take it into consideration, but it will not be a like overarching or overriding factor. Commissioner Sampson?
I think we've had a lot of conversation too around, and our speakers today highlighted that, you know, maybe we say the commission will recognize that in many government bodies, work of elected officials is seen as part-time, and that is not a belief that the commission or the city of Portland shares. And so any data that suggests a salary of a mayor or council members is anything less than full-time will be excluded from the market analysis, because that would just further the inequities that those low outlier salaries cause. And I think Barb and Commissioner Inkers, maybe you as well, might go over some of that too, because in looking in the market data, it looks like a lot of those low ones have already been pulled out. I think we had some that were like 34,000, just kind of crazy numbers. And so I see those aren't included. So, but yeah, I do see this as relevant, and I think that it would be easy enough to come up with a sentence. So I'm happy to help with that as well.
Or two, however many sentences, just something specific.
Yeah, I sort of think that we could address this particular piece of data and say that that in consideration of this article and this summary of data, the piece that is most specific to our work is the market pay section, that the other considerations, the other factors are not as relevant to the work that we're doing, because indeed they aren't, I mean, obviously. But I do think we should address the fact that we are pulling out the market pay from this particular piece of information and using it as one piece of the data that we are considering for as we work towards coming up with a recommendation, which then includes the fact that we looked at this and this is the piece that's relevant to us, as opposed to the other pieces, but we aren't just kind of dismissing it. If that makes sense. So we call it out specifically in this study.
So then I would ask, how are you considering it? I apologize, Commissioner Akers.
Oh. What kind of wording do you need from us, Jamie?
Just a specific criteria about how you will or will not be considering market pay in the way in which is described in this article. In setting your salary proposal.
We can work on that maybe in the co-chair, because I think I would have to pull, wording from the article, which I don't have up.
I'd have to go back and reread it too, because we looked at this a couple of weeks or a month ago, but I want to make sure that we capture that piece of it, because that is the piece that we are looking at and considering as part of our process. And so, but again, I don't have the wording, so I'll trust that you guys did read that article again and pull up the wording.
Commissioner Cooney?
I was pulling up the article. It's kind of why I was looking off screen, so my apologies. But the last sentence under the market pay section just says, in order to move toward anti-oppression, organizations must embrace pay concepts that depart from an over-reliance on market pay. I think we can adapt that sentence for our purposes, because that sounds like what we're trying to do here is still use market pay as a data point, but not overly rely on it. So I think that would give us I think we can adapt that easily.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's the slide. And then I know we're almost at 7:40, which is when we have public comment. But one other, I don't know if I want to complicate this, but speaking of the public comment that we received about the levels or functions, that some of that public comment was addressed towards not separating out the different commissioners, functioning as like the commission president, not paying differentials based on that. So that might be another place that we look, but I also don't want to muddle the waters for 7:40.
So great time check, Commissioner Angers. Thank you. Is everyone comfortable with us switching to public comment really quick? I think we should. Courtney, would you mind skipping ahead to that section of the presentation? Just so I can give a little, on record wording. So we are now going to take public comment. Community members. Well, I usually say community members have the opportunity to sign up ahead of time to make public comment on the website, but I want it to be on record that in fact, I used the wrong link for registering public comment this last round. And so it was not available for pre-registration. So I want to send apologies to anyone in community who tried to register and did not. I did receive at least one person emailing me directly saying that they tried to register, and that would be Janice Thompson, who is indeed here tonight to provide public comment. So thank you for going through the workaround, but we will make sure that that issue is resolved moving forward. So typically we go first calling on folks who have signed up online. And then we move to folks who signed up in person. And if we have time left on the agenda, we open it up to anyone else who would like to testify, who is in attendance and hasn't signed up in either case. If you are in attendance and you would like to speak tonight, please raise your Zoom hand or put it in the Q&A, identify yourself, and we will bring you in when it's your turn. And just as a reminder, the commission has decided to give 2 minutes for public comment. I don't have a timer on the screen, but I will be keeping track on my phone. So I believe Janice is still in the attendees. Is that correct, Liam?
Yep.
Would you mind promoting her, please?
I will go ahead and let her in.
Courtney, would you mind taking the presentation down? Thank you.
Hi, Janice. Janice, I think you're on mute.
Okay.
Hi.
Let's share. Can you hear me now? I think I'm unmuted.
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so I am Janice Thompson, representing the League of Women Voters of Portland. We submitted in a collegial spirit a second memo, but due to the timing of when our salary team could meet, it was only sent to you this afternoon. I'm particularly impressed that it got to you this fast. So really my only purpose this evening is to highlight 2 points in anticipation of your future reading. So first, we do have some fiscal responsibility observations with a particular caution about an undue focus on cost neutrality compared to equity considerations. We also advise against using the 0.4% of a recent fiscal year total operating budget for the city going to run the offices of current elected officials as a percentage to meet in the future. Second, the League does not support an expansion of the duties of council president and vice president beyond what is going to be allowed in the as of 2025 under the new charter, in terms of where beyond just presiding over council meetings. So this in turn means that your past discussion about, taking a look at salary differential just doesn't seem doesn't seem to need to be a big priority. I mean, we discussed that a little bit more. Now, on that point, we are sharing the section of the memo that we sent to you all on council officers with the Government Transition Advisory Committee, since we learned at their May 1st meeting that they may make this suggestion to the ISC. Now, the GTAC is appropriately advising on possible code changes regarding operations of the City Council that begins work in January 2025. However, the League does not think it is appropriate for the GTAC to suggest code changes on topics that should be the prerogative of the future council. A case in point is that the league sees an expansion of the role of council officers as a really good example of a decision that should be made by a future council and not recommended by the GTAC for enactment and code by the current council. So I hope this verbal
Janice.
summary is clear. Thanks for reading the memo. Let me know if you've got follow-up questions. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Any follow-up questions? Okay. Is there anybody in attendance who would like to provide public comment?
Commissioner Johnson has.
Commissioner Johnson?
Just one quick question. I haven't had a chance to look at the memo, but could you tell me what the GTAC is?
GTAC is the Government Advisory, Government
Translation.
Transition Advisory Council. We get it wrong all the time.
Is
Governmental
that-
Transition Advisory Council.
Is that a volunteer commission or is it who are
It is a committee. It isn't an independent commission like you are, but it was appointed by the mayor. It is a body of 15 community members who have been established to help guide the transition work as a whole. So they help provide some oversight, some advice about how the transition is moving through change, and also community engagement strategies and other things like that. So they have a pretty wide purview over all the transition work. They do not have any authority over the independent commissions, such as yourself or the district commission.
and are they volunteers?
Correct.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's okay. Is there anyone in attendance who wanted to provide public comment? Liam, are you seeing any hands?
I am not seeing any hands.
Okay. Then I think we can go back to where we left off. Courtney, would you mind pulling up the presentation? Thank you so much. And I think we are done with this one and on to the next, right?
Correct.
All right.
So this slide represents the current salaries of our elected officials and what they would be. And so those salaries were frozen in 2018 and they remain the same as they were in 2018. And the second column that you see represents what their salaries would have been if they would have received the same COLA increases, cost of living increases as their non-represented employees at the city.
Okay, so we ask again, do we want to keep or discard this data? And if we do want to keep this data, what criteria does this data inform? So first, to keep or discard.
Keep.
Keep.
Okay, now the hard part. For Jamie and team, what criteria is this getting to?
Fiscal responsibility, I think.
And within fiscal responsibility, how do we frame this as like a sentence or like a when we're looking at this? Is this that we're not exceeding the current salaries?
Well, I think in order to develop a budget or a salary, we have to sort of know what people are making now as just a fundamental benchmark. I mean, it's a starting salary. It doesn't mean it wouldn't go up or down, but I think we need to know we can't do this and we shouldn't do this. I think if we want to be responsible in a vacuum and just pull a number out of the air. So I think it's a benchmark, and it also provides us with a snapshot in time had the salaries stayed consistent with the non-represented employees with COLAs during the last 5 years or 4 years. So it's a benchmark. Not a ceiling or floor, it's just a benchmark.
Is that enough, Jamie? Do you need more from us?
I don't, as a citizen, understand how you would apply this data then. What does that mean? It's a benchmark. I think Commissioner Angers provided an example. The commission will not exceed the current benchmark for year 2023. I don't know, whatever that is. But what is the specific application of this data to your methodology? How does it help you determine a salary range or a salary number?
I trying to think of like how to word it. I think it's really important. I would use it as a comparison to the external market data that's been collected and those averages, to compare how far behind or ahead of market we are based on what these positions are currently being paid versus what would that difference from the market have been had COLA been applied all of these years. And I imagine that it will, I think it's the mayor and city auditor mostly that were lagging the market comparables that we've looked at thus far. And so if it closes that gap, then I think this would serve as a data point to support that this commission might want to recommend going forward that each year at a minimum, so years that you don't have a salary commission doing a full re-review, that a COLA is applied.
I think it also speaks towards transparency. We're being very transparent about the current salaries that our elected officials have. I mean, I think we need to be transparent about that. A lot of people in the community won't have this information or don't know this information, and we want to be transparent about the numbers.
To me, it also feels like we're using many data points. This is just one of them. We have our market data that, Barb and your team have wonderfully provided. Thank you. And then this is another data point. We have our cost of living. We have our thriving wage information. So it's really just another set of data to inform our final review process and decision making. It feels valuable to include it as part of that process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to beat on this drum, but I would ask again, how? So I hear the reflections that this information is transparent, it's responsible. Those are how it relates to your values. What I'm asking is, how does it relate to you getting to a specific number, a salary number, right? Does this provide a floor or a ceiling for you? What does this provide for you in terms of a decision about the salary that you want to set? And I think Commissioner Sampson might have had a good idea. Do you mind saying that again, Commissioner Sampson, what you said?
Yeah, so a way that we could specifically use this would be to plug the 2022 to 23 salary with COLAs into the market data set to see if it closes the gap specifically for the mayor and auditor from where we are currently behind market. And if that would suggest that we want to say COLA needs to be applied moving forward to these positions.
That sounds very specific to me.
Okay.
I like that.
Okay, that's what we want to use it for. See, COLA should be applied on
I want to
non-commission years.
ask a question only because I honestly don't know. We just had a discussion about not over utilizing market pay as a factor in making a decision. Does this criteria contradict that in any way? I don't know. It's just a question for you to contemplate it. Because I'm not quite sure I understood how they relate.
I think what we said is of that article, that the one area was the market pay consideration as one data point or one consideration, but not the only consideration. I think we have to, use market data. I don't know how we would develop a compensation plan without at least looking at market data. It doesn't mean it's the only thing we look at, but I don't think looking at market data is in conflict with keeping that as one piece of the puzzle that we're looking at here.
Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
Barb, does that feel like a clear enough criteria?
Yes, I think it makes sense to me, and I think it may be helpful to just look at all of the slides and think about, you know, the data in sum before we can start determining how it fits together. Maybe it would be more helpful to just sort of think about what a criteria would be. And then when we get to the end of, you know, sort of have a draft. And then when we get to the end and see how all of the information might work together, then to sort of start setting what we would discard and how we would use it. So I think it's a little bit difficult now, you know, because we haven't looked at the data in sum, and it's been a while since we looked at the earlier information. So it might be helpful to just go through and see what we have, and then maybe do the criteria pass secondarily.
That is a great idea. Why don't we, does everyone agree with that? I saw a bunch of thumbs up and there was like, yes, that would be helpful. Okay, great. I'm gonna
I do think it's
Tom.
worthwhile trying to think of what we might use it for versus being like, yep, sounds good, moving through, just so that when we go back that we've evaluated critically whether we actually do want to keep it.
Great idea. I'm gonna call time because it's 7:56. So we can work with the co-chairs to kind of restructure how we might walk through the data, provide an overarching kind of like, you know, idea of what's all available and how you might use it, and then make sure that we're still walking through each piece to come to some decisions. So thank you for walking through all of that with us. We will pick up where we left off next time. Courtney, would you mind skipping to the next step slide? Thank you so much. As you can see, our next meeting is Tuesday, May 23rd. Just as a reminder, the next two meetings are going to be back to back. So I want to make sure everyone is prepared that it's going to be the 23rd and it's going to be the 30th. I want to once again put out an invitation that our communications team would love if this commission would come in person for one of those days. And so in my next communication with you, I may remind you and encourage you to do that. It's a lovely room here, I can tell you. It even has bathrooms, it even has a kitchen. We can provide snacks. It's a whole thing. It'll be fun. Let me know. Again, it'll be hybrid. So we'll be here whether you show up or not. And the slides is any additional research requests, but I should have taken that off because we are not at that place where we are taking them. Although, because it says it, I don't want to
Yeah, I might have one more just based
Say
on
no.
some of the other
Okay, here we go.
numbers.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
my only other, so a lot of the upcoming slides are to do with living versus thriving wage. And there's quite a big difference between like family sizes if you're a single parent, or if you're in a two-person or one working and one stay-at-home situation. And so I would love if there was any data to reflect the actual demographics of the city of Portland. So we can make an informed decision about which of those data sets would be most relevant.
Can I ask also, since I didn't see the slides, do we have one that shows I know Barb, thank you for getting that total compensation percentage of 50%. I would like to see on one of the slides, a graph that shows the additional total compensation piece, adding in that 50% on the salary, particularly in light of some of the questions and concerns about benefits that were expressed by our guests tonight, to make sure that people understand that there is that factor in the wages on top of the actual base salary that goes into calculating the overall cost of these positions.
Absolutely.
And maybe just a short explanation of what those benefits are along with it, because most people don't know what the benefits are. I mean, just very brief, obviously. So people understand that in addition to the base salary, people will be eligible for this benefit package. And here are the pieces of that. As a city employee, this is what you're eligible for. So we cut out some of the concern if people have questions about, again, the half-time, full-time. I hope we're kind of, people will understand now that, and also that it's a fully benefited package, which I think is important too.
Got it. Absolutely.
Anything else? Courtney, next slide. 8 o'clock on the dot, y'all. We did it. Thanks for another great meeting. Really appreciate all of you. You will hear from us again soon. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.